Well, earlier you would have seen the President Cyril Ramaphosa again explaining his rationale, his reasoning for declaring a state of national disaster over our electricity crisis. He was in Parliament, but yet earlier today another organisation announcing it would go to court to challenge this decision. Already the DA and the trade union Solidarity have said they'll go to court. Now the organisation undoing tax abuse Outa say they're going to challenge this as well. The head of legal is Stephanie Fick. She joins us now. Stephanie, good afternoon to you. Why are you challenging the declaration of a national state of disaster?
So it's two parts, and the main part of this application is about reviewing the decision, not only to classify the so-called electricity crisis as a disaster, but also declaring a national state of disaster. We're asking the court to review it because we believe that the decision was, arbitrarily taken, unlawful, and irrational.
So, I mean, what's wrong with it? We have a national crisis. It's obvious we have a national crisis. Surely, if you have a national crisis, and frankly it is an economic disaster, declare a national disaster.
Well, the country is. I can't differ from you. I think the country, not only electricity, water is a disaster, everything is a disaster. But once you find yourself in the legal sphere, you need to be careful, how you interpret what a disaster is. But let's park that for a moment. The president chose a very big stage to announce a state of disaster, and guess what? Eskom, the utility or the SOE that provides 95% of our electricity, didn't know about this. So, and can you call a crisis that has been coming for 15 years, that has been with us for so many years, all of a sudden a crisis? But I think one of the main arguments is what is a state of a declaration of a state of disaster going to help? If you have legislation, regulations that can solve your problem, if you have an energy plan presented by Eskom 2 days before this declaration of a state of disaster saying, here is our plan, here is some of our achievements, and we are on the road to recovery. Whether there's a state of disaster or not, the electricity crisis is not going to be resolved tomorrow. It is a journey. And unfortunately, it's going to take a little bit of time. What we need is implementation, not a state of disaster.
You talk about regulations that we do have. At the moment, what we actually don't have, and it's maybe important to point this out, is that under the national state of disaster, no regulations have been published. So in your view, isn't the declaration null and void anyway for the moment?
I hear you, because it is a question. If you are sitting with a national, if you think that the crisis you are in is classified as a disaster, you call a national state of disaster, and then here we are. It's the 16th, and still no regulation. We still don't know what you're going to intend. What is your intention? What do you want to accomplish with this declaration of a state of disaster? It does, ask the question, and maybe can I be as bold as to say that I think that plays into any type of court case that will be made, because was this decision then rational, and how is this decision? Decision is one thing. It's the implementation. And what are you going to implement? Most probably the energy plan, because that's the one that makes sense. So I agree with you. Doesn't in law make the disaster declaration unlawful, or it will come to an end. But what it does, it show is what is, question mark, what is the real intention behind this decision?
This is, in a way, your organisation exists to undo tax abuse. I realise it's a clumsy name, I realise the history of it, but your whole thing is about the abuse of government money, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I imagine the concern, we've seen many people express this, that we had a national state of disaster quite recently. We kind of know how that ended. For those who've forgotten, there was, we understand now, quite a lot of corruption during that time. If you could be convinced that there would be no corruption as a result of the national state of disaster over energy, if you could be convinced, as the President said, that the Auditor General would play a key role in making sure that that didn't happen, would that remove your concerns?
No. So firstly, I think there's proof that although, the Auditor General, who does some lovely stuff, I mean, it's one of those offices that show that if they have a little bit more teeth, they can really hold people to account, and we're waiting for people to be held accountable. Is that this live checking that everything is done according to the book didn't help with COVID-19. And we saw the reports that came out of the Auditor General's office about just the sheer corruption and the inflated prices. I mean, it's still horrific to think that people will take advantage of a situation like COVID-19, but park that. If everything will go according to plan, the question still remains. What do you want to change with a state of disaster? Because our National Energy Act, the PFMA, makes provision for what Eskom needs to do, what the ministers need to do in order to fix this crisis, short-term, medium-term, long-term. What is a national state of disaster going to help you? It does give one a little bit of maybe there won't be as much corruption. But then I have to challenge you. The only thing you can go on is history. And there's a trust deficit. And I don't think anybody can be blamed to think that doesn't matter what you say, implementation has always been a problem. It's a 15-year problem. Why would it change now?
Well, it would change now because of the national state of disaster. We'd go to the argument that as a result we would get a lot more urgency.
Why? Because there's a state of disaster. So I hear what a state of disaster, we are how many days into this declaration? Still nothing. So, it's still an implementation problem. But what you need to understand is that there's not, the energy crisis needs to be changed practically. We need to add more capacity to the grid. State of disaster is not going to make that happen tomorrow. What you need to do is get maybe the renewables online. Think about hydrogen. Hopefully they don't think about car power ship and the sort of contracts that will cost us more than what it is worth. That is not an immediate solution. Medupi and Kusile, who is not working and will only come online, middle of this year, end of the year, and so forth. State of disaster is not going to help that. The fact that Eskom has said the immediate, thing that will change the load shedding currently is diesel. I mean, what is stopping anybody for, giving Eskom the necessary revenue in order to get the diesel? Current legislation makes provision for it, but I think maybe I should just add that it also creates an environment where a local government is a state of disaster. Are we going to call state of disasters every time you are unable, you have an inability to govern, to administrate, and we can't let that happen. You can't abuse a process that was not intended for this to be called. And is a blackout the disaster? They say potential disaster. Eskom is quite confident that although load shedding exists, that they load shed in order to prevent a total blackout. So a blackout is also not the disaster. Disaster is something that happened, like in KwaZulu-Natal. That's an excellent example of a disaster.
Stephanie, the president said today, and he was referring to opposition parties, he made the point that, everyone criticizes, but there were no solutions. And maybe it's fair to say that this applies to organizations like yours. You may dispute that. But do you have solutions to the power crisis?
I think, let me say this. I think it is a complex problem. And if you read, for example, the presentation that Eskom made to Parliament 2 days before this declaration, if you look at the plans that they are working on, it sounds reasonable, it is sound solutions, it is practical, and if those are implemented, I think I can say with confidence that we will definitely assist with the current energy crisis we have. If we can get political will in order to provide Eskom with the necessary resources to protect our grid. I mean, I don't think Eskom is a big problem, but also local government. I mean, how many times we sit without electricity because the substation was, there was sabotage and all of that. And I do think there are, like I said, short-term, medium and long-term solutions in order to fix this problem. Get the diesel so that the gas turbines can provide extra energy. Get the renewables online. Everybody's saying it is expensive. It is already less expensive. They will take time to get on the grid. But let's start and get them on. Give tax incentives to business, to residents, when they buy solar power. A question, let's say I have extra power, especially during the day, from my solar system. Why can't I assist my neighbor? Why haven't we discussed? I mean, it's already law that municipalities, like what Cape Town did, municipalities can procure electricity from private individuals. It's there. We just need to implement. The biggest problem we have is implementation. Because guess what? Instead of thinking about the integrated energy plan, which should be reviewed, and with our circumstances should be reviewed on a constant basis, we're chasing nuclear and we're chasing car power ships instead of thinking about smaller solutions that will fix the problem. And I think we need to give Eskom the support they deserve in order to get these plans going, which, by the way, is on its way.
Thank you very much indeed. I really do appreciate it. Stephanie Fick, the head of legal at Outa, the organisation undoing tax abuse.